Let's continue on with this and let's make this look even more like a sketch. One easy way to do that is to go ahead and break up this line work. Now we did a little bit of that breakup when we were doing the outline edge. If you remember under the modifiers, we added a little bit of outline noise, but we can break up this outline even more and make it look like we did kind of a loose sketch and then refine it a bit with some line work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this drop shadow here that's creating that kind of that aberration that was going on, and we're going to replace this one. Instead of doing a drop shadow, let's go ahead and, if you want to, you can go ahead and reset that drop shadow filter. But what we're going to do is we're going to change that drop shadow filter to the Displace filter. So you go over here to Displace, and by default it's just going to look like a very kind of crystallized fuzzy image. If you bring this Displace value down, you're going to see it's going to kind of bring that breakup into a little bit more localized areas. If you go down here to the radius and you start cranking that up, that causes that warp to be a little bit less. So between these two, if you crank up the displacement and then you crank up the radius, you can see you can start getting very wavy lines. If you crank down the displacement, it's going to lower the displacement effect. And then if you go in here to the radius and you bring this down, that's going to make it a little bit smaller and smaller breakup. Now Displace does go negative. This is a positive 29. You can actually go negative 29, and that's just going to be a slightly different algorithm. So you can kind of play with both of those and see which version gives you the best result. But right now it looks like just kind of a badly drawn image. So what we want to do is make it look like an underlying sketch that was drawn on top of and refined. So how we can do that is, number one, we can drop the opacity down, and that'll let a little bit of that underlying image show through. So you can see as I drop the opacity down to 0, it gets rid of those lines, and then as we bring it back up, you're kind of seeing a slightly lighter version. Another thing I would do though is go into this blend mode here, and if you want to make it look like a pencil sketch underneath, change that to darken, and then only the darker areas is where that displace is going to show up. So you can see as I increase that displace and then crank up that radius, you're going to see what appears to be like sketchy lines going out here. And in fact, I'm going to go back to our outline edge modifiers. I'm going to change that outline thickness to 1. And then we're going to go back to the displace filter. I'm going to drop that opacity down a little bit more. So now you can see what appears to be like kind of a loose sketch underneath and then a refined sketch on top of that. If you want to give it more of a painterly look, you can change the blend mode from darken to lighten, and then wherever the displace version of the image is lighter, we'd go ahead and break that up, and it might be more apparent if we go back here to the outline edge, and we go ahead and crank that up a little bit. And if you wanted to see how all of this would behave with color, remember you can turn on your polyframe here, and you can turn off the line option. I'm going to go down here to polygroups and do an auto groups. That's going to give me a polygroup on every one of these, and I'm going to switch this back over to our matcap gray. It doesn't really matter because, and it doesn't matter if I switch it over to Skin Shader 4, just so you can see those polygroups a little bit better. But remember, we have the material shading here overriding the matcap gray. Now, if I do hit BPR, it is going to turn it back to grayscale because in the second one right here, saturation, we do have it desaturated. So you can go ahead and turn that off, and now you're going to see this is the result you're going to get. And if you go over here and turn this outline off and use the displace, you can see instead of getting a drawing sketchy look, you can use Displace to kind of break this up in kind of a painterly way. But let's go ahead and turn off polyframe here. We'll go ahead and turn back on our desaturate, our outline edge, and you can stack these displace modes. So what we can do is we can say, copy this displace and let's change this back to darken. So let's go ahead and hit BPR. So this is the darken result, and you know what, let's go back here to outline edge. We'll drop this back down to 1. So we've copied this one, and right here, let's go ahead and paste another displace, and this displace here we're going to set to lighten, which it looks like it already got set to lighten. So now you can see we're breaking up that outline even more. So you can play with these settings a little bit, play with the opacity if you want to, and that'll give you even a little bit more line breakup.